I'm Garrett Salpeter, and I believe that the most powerful and transformative way to help people recover from pain and injury, heal from trauma, and reach their highest levels of fitness and performance is to focus on the nervous system. In this podcast, we'll share knowledge from the frontiers of neuroscience and inspirational stories of how applying that knowledge has empowered people from all walks of life to heal, adapt, and grow. Hello, NeuFit Nation. Welcome back to the Undercurrent podcast. We're going to do one more solo episode here before we invite some great guests on for the next several episodes. So we did in episode 109, our neuroscience of leadership. In episode 110, we did the neuroscience of longevity. And today, I want to guide you through a few different exercises and thought processes that have been very powerful, have really helped me, and I hope and certainly intend and expect that they will do the same for you. So first, a little bit of context. Big picture, am someone who generally has been afraid of really thinking about my own death. And I think it's really healthy. There's even good research showing that contemplating death actually helps with mental health and psychological outlook and all these things. So I know that, it's good, it's helpful. It also, subjectively, I hear from people who do death meditations or reflect on their death that it helps them understand how precious and finite life is. And I had an experience that was the immediate inspiration for this, where I was at an event led by a Hindu priest named Dandapani. And Dandapani is Sri Lankan by heritage. He lived as a Hindu monk, so in a monastery for 10 years, living a celibate life and very simple life with no possessions or attachments. And then when his vows were complete, he went on to become an entrepreneur and trains business owners and professionals, even elite athletes, in applying principles of mindfulness and a lot of the things that he learned in his experience as a monk to improve their mental health, their outlook, etc. And he talked to us about the importance of identifying a core purpose. And so to establish the context, I would like to share a little bit of this with you, where our core purpose, one, it is something that we should be able to do regardless of what happens to somebody else. So if I say, for example, my core purpose is my business or my family, that may be problematic because one day my business may no longer exist, or family members may no longer be alive, stuff like that. That's difficult to envision, but is possible. So, a core purpose that's around self-actualization or doing something that someone can do independent of external circumstances up until the day they die is very valuable. And then there can be sub purposes around one's family, business, etc. But the value in this comes from being able to prioritize, understand that life is finite. I only have a finite amount of time here. So how I spend that time, how I choose to spend that time, is really ultimately the only decision I have to make. And then within that, how I spend my finite energy is very important. Ultimately is probably the most important thing. And time and energy, one might think at first glance they're interchangeable, but it's possible for me to be spending time at the dinner table with my family, but have my awareness be on a business problem or something I'm dealing with. And so I'm physically in one place, but mentally and emotionally, I'm somewhere else. And where awareness goes, energy follows, or energy flows. So my energy in that example would not actually be there present having dinner with my children, for example. So having a purpose gives me the clarity to understand where I should put my energy to give me the best chance of living congruent to my purpose, and helps me avoid things that would otherwise drain my energy or may not be worthwhile investments of that energy. A lot of us, myself included, would be very discerning when it comes time to invest money. If someone came up and asked me for a $50,000 investment in something, I would ask them a lot of questions around what their intended use is for the money. Do they have any relevant history or a track record that can help give me confidence they're going to be successful? What is the overall mission of the enterprise? What's their plan? And oftentimes we will give, I know I have, give energy to people or to things without necessarily looking with that level of discernment. And so, I found this to be a very powerful exercise, and understanding that working towards, self-actualization, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, sort of the top rung of that, how that has sort of been an unspoken purpose in my life, and getting clear on that really gave me some energy and clarity and was very productive. And so I invite you to really think about what your core purpose is in your life. And that then, of course, can help you prioritize. And he led us through an exercise that I'm going to share with you next, because this was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had of really cutting through the clutter and having to prioritize. So I actually want you to do this thought experiment right now. And that is, imagine you have just been told that you have 3 hours left to live. How are you going to spend those 3 hours? And I'll give you a moment to reflect on it, think about it. If you're in a place where you can write it down, please do that, or you can write it down later if you're driving. But I'm going to give you a moment. Okay, if you want more time, please stop the recording, take as much time as you wish, and we'll be here to continue the discussion when you get back. If you're back now, we can continue. So for me, this was very powerful. I really put myself in that. I envisioned receiving that news that, oh my gosh, I have 3 hours left to live. And I actually started tearing up in a room with a bunch of other professionals being led through this exercise. And I realized, like, oh my gosh, I would go see my kids, and I'd want to spend time with them. I want to hug them, want to pass along, a few last final words. I would want to call, see if I could call a group of our team together at NeuFit to let them know how much I appreciate them, and to let them know, at least a few of my wishes, that they would continue to run and lead the business and continue to fulfill our mission in the world, which is extremely important to me. So I'd see my kids, the team, and then I would stop by and try to see my former wife also, with whom I still have a great relationship. We're still, of course, co-parents and friends, but I would want to see her. So it was just sort of like, it was so interesting. The question was, okay, if you have 3 hours left to live, how many people are going to stay at this presentation? Well, obviously, I don't know if it's obvious or not, but everyone said they were going to leave. They weren't going to spend their last 3 hours. As great as the presentation was, they were going to go do these other things. So that's a really powerful exercise. At least it was for me, and many others in the room. Powerful way to really just filter through what's important.
Thank you so much for listening to the Undercurrent podcast. If you're interested in learning more about how NeuFit and the newbie can impact your life, please visit our website at www.new.fit. That's NEU.fit. So you can learn more about how it might integrate into your professional practice, how you can use it as a patient, and you can also connect with our team there.
I want to shift. I mean, that's a very, very, heavy topic. I encourage you to spend time with that. I think reflecting on our mortality is very valuable. It's something I've just really started doing recently, and it makes me appreciate so many things and people, and just really, really understand the finite and precious nature of life in a way that I sometimes don't think about in day to day life. So um, yeah, I want to leave that there for further reflection. Invite you to think about and ponder mortality in whatever way it feels accessible and valuable to you. And then I also want to shift and apply this to business, because it was so interesting that going through this experience reminded me of another event I was at maybe a couple months prior, where I heard Ben Hardy, Dr. Benjamin Hardy, speak on this topic of what he calls the science of scaling. And he led us through an exercise, and he has a book out. I think it's out by now. I was grateful to have an advanced copy and get to hear him speak through this mastermind group that we're both in. And um, he led us through an exercise that was sort of a similar exercise for business. And he told us to either come up with or just think about what we've already created as kind of a 10-year goal, or a BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal, or whatever your personal version of that is, that kind of long-term, like the equivalent of climbing Mount Everest for your business. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take all hands on deck. It's going to take a lot of different iterations of the systems and processes, et cetera. So imagine that 10-year goal. Now, ask yourself, what would it take to accomplish that in 1 year? And asking that question does a similar thing as the what are you going to do if you have 3 hours left to live exercise. It forces you to cut through the clutter and the bullshit, pardon my language, but forces you to really prioritize on the few things that are going to matter the most. And so I got to thinking about that in light of, a physical therapy practice, for example. If I'm trying to, or, chiropractic practice, rehabilitation business, if I'm trying to achieve my 10-year goals in 1 year, what are some things I might do? If I look at growing my patient volume over time, I might, if I think I have 10 years, I might build slowly through word of mouth, do some networking, dabbling in social media, try different experiments. If I have to compress that into 1 year, I might be a lot more targeted and go all in on the highest leverage channels right away, like find 1 to 2 referral sources, maybe an orthopedic surgeon or a group of surgeons, a particular gym or something, and just really try to lock in those types of partnerships immediately and really invest the energy to cultivate and build those relationships and provide services and demonstrate value and show how we can provide value for them. I'd probably implement a system for patient retention and upsell and engagement right away, whether it be maintenance programs, cash pay wellness services, things like that, instead of waiting for years to diversify revenue. So I'd really focus on what can move the needle right now. It creates that sense of urgency. In terms of team building, also, I might, if I think I have 10 years, I might gradually hire, and I might be a little more lackadaisical in who I hire. Whereas if I only have 1 year, I'm going to hire the A team from the start. I'm going to be a lot more discerning. I might even pay above market to really be able to retain the best people, the true A players. And my mindset, my approach is going to be different. I also might take a different approach to differentiating my clinic. Instead of slowly adding certain specialties, I'd probably choose one specialty that's profitable and scalable right away, whether it be a particular niche of focusing on ACL rehab or chronic pain, or whether it be a niche like the NeuFit method, which, of course, you are likely familiar with. And I wouldn't be trying to bring everything to everyone, but I would really try to go all in on the highest leverage thing there. In terms of systems and technology, I might instead of starting off with paper or some sort of easy EHR or EMR system, if I think I'm trying to reach the top of that mountain in 1 year instead of 10, I'm probably going to go all in on some sort of enterprise level system that can scale, that can allow me to automate scheduling and follow-ups and payments and outcome tracking all from day one. If I'm going to build something that's going to be, if I'm going to build a building that's 100 stories tall versus a building that's 2 stories tall, I'm going to spend a lot more time digging down, building a deeper foundation to support that taller building. Whereas if it's 2 stories, I'm not going to dig down as deep. I can kind of start building up right away. And it's a different mindset. You can't interchange those. You can, if you have a 2-story building and then you want to build a 100-story building, you have to tear down the 2-story building and start over. You can't just add more stories because you don't have that right foundation. I might think differently about my revenue model and partnerships and community presence and stuff like that. So I think the time compression, when I think about it, really inspires me to cut out incrementalism and ignore lower leverage projects and really go all in on a few force multipliers. So I really like that exercise, and I encourage you to really think about that. It could be a solo exercise, or it could be something you do with your leadership team or your team overall. Establish that, what's our 5-year goal, 10-year goal, our BHAG, our version of climbing Mount Everest as a team. What's our ultimate goal? It's a revenue number or number of locations, or if it's a different business, if it's a business like, of course, we sell the NeuFit. It's perhaps a number of devices out there, a number of locations in which the technology is being used. Something like that. Number of lives touched. Tony Robbins talks about feeding 1 billion people, the number of meals. So it's this sort of big, takes a lot of time and effort and iteration in order to get there. So I encourage you to set that, and then as an experiment, ask whoever's in the meeting with you, what could we do to achieve that in 1 year? It's a little intimidating, right? It's a little scary to think about, but it's such a great exercise. Just like asking, how would I spend the last 3 hours of my life? It's a great exercise because it forces us to cut through the clutter and focus on what really matters. So I hope these exercises are as impactful, as powerful for you as they have been for me. And I'm curious to hear what you think of this kind of shorter, little more of a prompting thought experiment type of podcast episode. So let me know what you think. And we will be back with our next one. We have a few really good, compelling guest interviews that will be coming out in future episodes. And thank you, as always, for tuning into the Undercurrent podcast. We will see you next time.